Hello. I'm a little under the weather right now. I caught a bug from my daughters, but I want to make a quick video to honor Steve McCarthy, who just passed away this past week. Steve McCarthy was the founder and original head distiller of Clear Creek Distillery in Oregon. Sorry. He basically started out as a college kid, made a bunch of trips to France, particularly Alsace, where he noticed that the farmers there didn't like to waste stuff. Didn't want to throw away any excess fruit that they couldn't sell or that wasn't worth selling, so they would make booze out of it. They would ferment it and distill it, sometimes themselves, sometimes with a local contract distiller. They would make eau de vie out of their leftovers, just because what else are you gonna do with it, you know? And he wasn't a huge fan of the stuff at the time, but Steve went back to Oregon and noticed that quite a lot of the farmers around there had a similar sort of problem. You know, they would have lots of fruit that they couldn't sell, that had maybe been graded down for no particularly good reason. And he would he decided to start making booze out of it. He founded Clear Creek in '85. Got himself a still. Took a while for that. Put it together himself. Took a while for that. And that started basically outbidding the big sort of bulk winemakers and distilleries for the graded down fruit that was lying around the farms of Oregon, and making eau de vie of it. And you might say, okay, why is all this important? Because Clear Creek Distillery started in 1985. It's really one of the first generation of distilleries that happened after Prohibition, along with Germain Robin and St. George in California. And so it's not like, Steve McCarthy was the first person in the U.S. ever to make fruit brandy. Actually, probably the first booze ever made in the colonies, in the Americas, was probably fruit brandy. But what you have to respect is that the Prohibition basically wiped out, with the exception of big bulk distillers in Kentucky, or say what would eventually become the Seagram's plant in Indiana. Prohibition basically wiped out distilling in the United States, particularly the smaller distillers. So what you have represented in Clear Creek and these other sort of early 80s distilleries was a rebirth of these traditions. And I think if you kind of got all the second and third generation American micro distillers, craft distillers in a room, quite a lot of them will admit to having taken a lot of inspiration from Clear Creek and what Steve had done there. So there's another thing which is important, which is that in around the early 90s, 92 or 93, Steve got a chance to try Lagavulin 16, decided he wanted to make something like that. So we also have McCarthy's pot distilled single malt whiskey from Oregon on behalf of him. So I'm going to pour a glass of this in honor of Steve. Well, let's pour some out for the angels. There we go. This bottle I bought when I saw this. So let me give you a close up of the data. This, so far as I know, is the first single barrel, barrel strength release that McCarthy's ever did. This was a party strength, party source pick. Apparently, it took a while for them to get it, and it is barrel number 374, bottled October 3rd, 2013, and bottled at 49.9% ABV. When I saw this on the Party Source website, I basically immediately started planning future trips around it. I got 2 bottles of this. The first bottle I opened immediately. The second bottle I was planning on saving for posterity, but this felt like a good time to open it. And what this is, I mean, what McCarthy's represents is, you know, depending on when you think it's sort of a tie between, or at least a photo finish between them and St. George on who was the first to sort of create American single malt post-Prohibition. But these were among the first. They were probably the first to hit. Basically, Jim Murray stopped by the distillery around the year 2000, thought this was great, and really put it into the public consciousness. I'm not going to review this because my nose and palate just aren't there, but I really love this stuff. So, I mean, so on the one hand, you can point to this as a kind of inflection point for, you know, not just craft distilling, but like craft whiskey in general, which is kind of, you know, taken a huge role in, well, among other things, what we here on YouTube talk about. And it's just, it's still delightful. I mean, it's still, they're sourcing the barley from the Port Ellen's maltings. So you would think it would just smell like a you know, an Isla alike, but it really doesn't. In a very, very early video, Ralphie described this as a kind of Isla eau de vie, which I think nails it, basically. It's like, there's just a purity to this. There's, in some respects, it reminds me of Kalila at its very best, like young Kalila at its very best. But whereas Kalila is kind of lemony and, you know, maritime, this is much more medicinal and slightly floral. And they're aging this in Oregon oak, right? So Garyana, which adds its own little dimension. So Garyana reminds me of, aspects of it remind me of American white oak. Aspects of it remind me of like oh, what is it? I'm blanking now. That oak that Italian wine is always aged in. Slavonian oak, sorry. But it's also kind of its own thing. It just adds this, yeah, additional medicinal touch to this. It's so aromatic, and it's also just really easy drinking, especially for something at 50%. And if you think about it, I mean, something like this isn't just setting the stage for, you know, craft whiskey in the United States. It's setting the stage for what we're beginning to see with new distilleries in Scotland, in Ireland, across the world. You know, back circa the 90s, no one would have thought a 2-year-old, 3-year-old whiskey could have possibly been good, could have possibly sold. But hey, you get your cask right, you get the distilling right, and it's absolutely fabulous. So yeah, this is just a little homage, I guess, and a gesture of appreciation to Steve McCarthy, who has therefore had such an effect. You know, maybe Clear Creek is not the kind of household name that some of the smaller so-called micro distilleries are these days, but I think you know, among distillers, this Mr. McCarthy was hugely respected, and I want to just put a nod out there in his memory. Cheers, Steve.